The rain-soaked city was still half asleep when a tired young waitress wiped her hands on a frayed apron, unaware that the next few hours would quietly rearrange the course of her entire life. In a world where wealth often walks past poverty without a glance, destiny sometimes arrives dressed in rags, carrying a test no one knows they are taking. This is not just a story about money or disguise, but about quiet kindness, unseen strength, and how a single human choice can echo forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that restore faith in humanity, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Emily Carter had learned early that life did not slow down for grief or exhaustion. At 24, she carried responsibilities that felt far heavier than her slight frame. Her mother's long illness had drained every saving they ever had, and when the hospital bills finally stopped, the emptiness they left behind did not. Emily worked double shifts at a small, aging diner on the edge of the city, a place most people barely noticed unless their car broke down nearby. The floor tiles were cracked, the booze wobbled, and the tips were unreliable, but it was honest work. Every morning she tied her hair back, practiced a soft smile in the mirror, and reminded herself that dignity did not come from comfort but from effort. The diner's bell rang weekly as customers came and went, mostly construction workers, night shift guards, and people whose lives, like Emily's, ran on survival rather than dreams. That morning, as the rain slowed to a mist, a man stepped inside who seemed out of place even among the forgotten. His coat was worn thin, his shoes uneven, his beard untrimmed. He smelled faintly of the street and exhaustion. Many would have called him a beggar without hesitation. Some of the regulars shifted uncomfortably, already expecting trouble, already preparing to look away. Emily noticed him the same way she noticed everyone else, as a human being first. She guided him to a corner table without hesitation, wiped the surface clean, and handed him a menu even though she could see his hands trembling. She did not rush him, did not stare, did not warn him that he had to order quickly or leave. What she did was simple, almost invisible, and yet it required something rare in a hard world: patience without judgment. The man was named Jonathan Reed, though no one there knew it. Beneath the dirt-stained coat and tired eyes lived a man who owned buildings taller than the diner itself, companies that employed thousands, and a fortune that could erase hunger in a heartbeat. Years of success had not protected him from loneliness or betrayal. Surrounded by advisors who praised him and partners who smiled until contracts were signed, Jonathan had grown uncertain of what was real. After a bitter experience with people who valued him only for his money, he decided to test the world in the only way he knew how: by removing his wealth from the equation entirely. Disguised as someone society ignored, Jonathan wanted to see how people treated him when there was nothing to gain. He had visited cafes, restaurants, and stores across the city, enduring cold looks, refusal, and humiliation. Doors closed in his face. Food was snatched away. Words cut deeper than hunger. Each rejection hardened something inside him, confirming his worst fears about human nature. By the time he reached Emily's diner, he expected nothing different. Emily returned with water before he even asked, placing the glass carefully, as if it mattered. She noticed how he cradled it, like something precious. Her own stomach tightened. She knew that look. It was the look of someone calculating how long they could go without food. Without making a show of it, she mentioned a small breakfast special that wasn't on the menu anymore, something affordable, something warm. When he hesitated, she waited. When he nodded, she smiled, not brightly, not falsely, but with quiet reassurance. Behind the counter, Emily moved with practiced efficiency, though her thoughts wandered. Rent was due in 3 days. Her electricity bill sat unopened in her bag. Her shoes were wearing thin, and her back ached from standing too long. Yet when she placed the plate in front of the man, she added a piece of toast she'd paid for herself, pretending it was a mistake from the kitchen. She did not announce her generosity. She did not expect gratitude. She simply could not let someone go hungry when she had the power, however small, to stop it. Jonathan watched her from beneath lowered lashes, every instinct trained to observe. He saw how she treated other customers the same way, greeting them warmly, refilling cups without being asked, listening when an elderly man complained about his knee. There was no performance, no selective kindness reserved for those who looked important. It unsettled him more than cruelty ever had. When he finished eating, he searched his pockets and found only a few coins, part of the test, part of the humiliation he had prepared himself for. Emily waved it off gently, telling him it was enough. She even slipped a napkin into his hand with a small bakery address written on it, explaining that they gave away bread at closing time. She did not lecture him. She did not pity him. She simply offered information, the way one human helps another survive another day. Jonathan left the diner carrying more than warmth in his stomach. He carried something he had almost forgotten existed, respect without condition. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, and sunlight filtered through the clouds like a promise. For the first time in weeks, he sat on a bench and did nothing, letting the moment settle. The test he thought he was conducting on others had turned inward. He realized how rare Emily's behavior was, and how easily it could have been him, had circumstances shifted slightly. Over the following days, Jonathan returned, always in disguise, always observing. Emily never changed. On days when business was slow, she cleaned until her fingers cracked. On days when customers were rude, she absorbed it quietly, refusing to let bitterness take root. Jonathan learned from overheard conversations that Emily had once dreamed of becoming a nurse, inspired by caring for her mother, but had dropped out when money ran out. He learned that she walked an hour to work to save bus fare. He learned that she volunteered one evening a week at a local shelter, not because she had extra time, but because she remembered what it felt like to be desperate. The more Jonathan saw, the heavier his disguise became. He began to feel ashamed of the game he was playing, yet grateful that he had played it long enough to meet someone like her. The final day came unexpectedly. The diner was crowded, tempers short. A customer spilled coffee and blamed Emily loudly. She apologized, cleaned it up, and continued working, her hands shaking slightly but her composure intact. Jonathan felt something inside him break open. He paid his bill, left the largest tip he could without revealing himself, and walked out knowing this could not end quietly. 2 days later, Emily was called into the diner after her shift, confused and anxious. A man in a tailored suit stood near the counter, out of place in a room that smelled of grease and coffee. When he turned, she recognized the eyes instantly. The transformation was staggering, but the calm gravity was the same. Jonathan introduced himself not as a savior, but as a witness. He explained the test without excuses, admitting his mistrust, his disappointment, and how her simple, consistent kindness had undone him. Emily listened in stunned silence, embarrassment and disbelief mixing in her chest. She did not feel proud. She felt exposed. Jonathan told her that kindness like hers should not struggle to survive. He offered to pay for her education, to give her a chance to become what she once dreamed of being. He offered her a position in one of his foundations, helping design programs that treated people with dignity, not charity. He made it clear there were no strings, no expectations of gratitude, only an opportunity. Life did not transform overnight like a movie montage. Emily hesitated, doubted, questioned her worth. But she accepted, step by careful step. Months later, she sat in a classroom again, textbooks heavy in her arms, heart even heavier with purpose. She still worked part-time at the diner, refusing to forget where she came from. Jonathan, changed in ways money could never achieve, restructured his businesses with humanity at the center, often crediting a young waitress who never knew she was being tested. Just before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please pause for a moment and comment below one small act of kindness you've given or received that you will never forget. Years later, Emily stood in a hospital corridor, now a nurse, holding the hand of a frightened patient, offering the same calm reassurance she once gave a hungry stranger. Jonathan watched from a distance during one of his foundation visits, unseen, content to remain so. The world had not changed completely, but 2 lives had, and the ripple spread farther than either of them could measure. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness still matters even when no one is watching, please like this video, share it, and leave a comment. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who may need hope today. Sometimes, the smallest kindness, given quietly, is powerful enough to change a life forever. Time passed, but the echo of that small diner never left Emily Carter's heart. Life moved forward with a speed that sometimes scared her. Nursing school was harder than anything she had imagined. Long nights of studying, early morning clinical shifts, and the constant fear of failing pressed down on her relentlessly. There were days she sat alone in her tiny apartment, surrounded by books, wondering if she truly belonged in this new world she had stepped into. The mirror no longer showed a tired waitress in a worn apron, yet inside, she was still the same girl who counted coins before buying groceries. Success did not erase fear overnight, it only changed its shape. Jonathan Reed watched her progress quietly, never interfering, never treating her like a project. He had learned that real help did not mean control. Through his foundation, he ensured her tuition was covered, but he refused to smooth every obstacle. He wanted Emily to grow strong, not dependent. In meetings with executives and policymakers, he often spoke about dignity, about the invisible people society overlooked. Few knew those speeches were born from a cracked tile diner and a plate of food given without judgment. Emily's greatest test came during her final year, when her workload doubled and exhaustion became a constant companion. One night, after a particularly brutal hospital shift, she encountered a homeless woman sitting outside the emergency entrance, soaked from the rain and shaking. Security was nearby, prepared to move her along. For a moment, Emily froze. She was late, tired, and overwhelmed. Then memory surfaced like a quiet voice reminding her who she had once been, and who had changed her life without meaning to. She removed her jacket, wrapped it around the woman's shoulders, and stayed until help arrived. No cameras recorded it, no one praised her, but something inside her settled, as if her life had come full circle. When Emily graduated, she did not choose a prestigious private hospital. She chose a public one in a struggling neighborhood, where resources were limited and compassion was desperately needed. Her days were filled with patients who reminded her of her mother, of Jonathan in disguise, of herself. She listened when others rushed. She stayed when others left. Slowly, stories spread among patients about a nurse who treated them like family, who remembered names, who made a harsh place feel human. Jonathan's transformation deepened as well. He sold off ventures that profited from exploitation and reinvested in affordable housing, education programs, and medical outreach. He began spending time in places he once avoided, not in disguise anymore, but without ceremony. Wealth no longer defined him, responsibility did. In private moments, he often reflected on how close he had come to losing faith in humanity, and how one young woman had restored it without ever knowing she was doing so. Years later, at a foundation event meant to honor community leaders, Emily was asked to speak. Standing at the podium, lights warm on her face, she felt the old nerves return. She spoke not about success, but about struggle. About how kindness should never depend on status. About how the smallest gesture can become a turning point in someone's life. Jonathan listened from the audience, his eyes heavy with emotion, understanding that this was no longer his story to tell. It belonged to the world now. Just before the ending, we ask you to pause and comment below. Do you believe one small act of kindness can truly change a life, and why? As the years continued, Emily trained new nurses, passing on the values she lived by. Jonathan grew older, quieter, content knowing that his legacy was no longer measured only in numbers, but in lives uplifted. Somewhere, every day, a tired worker, a hungry stranger, or a frightened patient felt a little less alone because kindness had been shown to them, freely and without expectation. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that goodness still exists in ordinary people and ordinary moments, please like the video, share it with others, and leave a heartfelt comment. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and reaching hearts that need them. In the end, the world does not change through grand gestures alone, but through quiet compassion, repeated every day, by people who choose to care even when no one is watching.
Time did not soften the consequences for Eleanor Whitmore's children, but it did give Eleanor something far more valuable than victory: clarity. After reclaiming her life and stepping away from the empire that had once defined her, she settled into a quieter rhythm in a modest coastal town where the air smelled of salt and the mornings arrived without fear. For the first time in years, she woke without the weight of suspicion on her chest. Yet healing is never instant, and even in peace, memories have a way of knocking when the world grows quiet. News traveled slowly but persistently. Andrew's name appeared in business columns as a cautionary tale, a former executive undone by greed and ethical failure. Margaret retreated from social circles that once celebrated her, her confidence replaced by a bitterness she could not hide. Lucas faced ongoing legal battles that drained both reputation and spirit. They were alive, free, and financially stable enough to survive, but frozen in a world that no longer trusted them. Eleanor followed these updates from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a strange, aching sorrow that only a mother could understand. Justice had been served, yet motherhood does not vanish with betrayal. In her new town, Eleanor found herself drawn to people who reminded her of who she had been before wealth complicated everything. She volunteered at a community center, helping elderly men and women navigate paperwork, medical systems, and the quiet loneliness that mirrors her own past pain. She listened more than she spoke, offering understanding rather than solutions. In those moments, she realized her suffering had given her a gift, an ability to recognize silent despair and meet it with compassion. Slowly, her story spread, not as gossip, but as inspiration. People saw in her a woman who had lost everything and chosen to rebuild with grace. One autumn afternoon, a letter arrived without warning. The handwriting was unmistakable. Andrew. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, as if carrying years of unspoken regret. He wrote of sleepless nights, of the crushing realization that success built on betrayal rots from the inside. He admitted that fear, not ambition, had driven him. Fear of losing relevance, fear of becoming invisible, fear of waiting too long for inheritance rather than earning respect. He did not ask for money. He asked for forgiveness, or at least understanding. Eleanor held the letter for a long time before folding it carefully and placing it beside the others she would later receive. Margaret's letter followed weeks later, colder in tone but raw in its honesty. She wrote about envy, about living in the shadow of a powerful mother and mistaking control for strength. Lucas wrote last, his words heavy with guilt and exhaustion, acknowledging that law had become a weapon instead of a shield. Each letter reopened wounds Eleanor thought had healed. Each one reminded her that while she had survived betrayal, her children were still lost in the ruins of their own choices. Eleanor did not rush to respond. She sought counsel, reflection, and prayer. Forgiveness, she understood, was not surrender, nor was it an obligation. It was a decision that must protect the forgiver first. When she finally replied, her words were measured and firm. She expressed love without blindness, compassion without permission for harm. She made it clear that reconciliation would require accountability, time, and change, not excuses. She did not invite them back into her life immediately, but she left the door unlocked, not wide open. Months passed. Andrew began working quietly with small startups, rebuilding trust from the ground up. Margaret entered therapy, stepping away from public life entirely. Lucas accepted a position far from power, choosing service over status. None of them asked Eleanor for help again. They learned, slowly and painfully, what it meant to stand on their own. If this part of the story is resonating with you, if you've ever struggled with forgiveness, family wounds, or starting over, take a moment to like this video, share it, and comment your thoughts below. Your engagement helps these stories reach hearts that may be hurting in silence. Years later, Eleanor agreed to a simple meeting. No lawyers. No contracts. Just coffee at a quiet cafe. The reunion was not emotional or dramatic. It was careful, restrained, and real. There were no promises of a perfect future, only a mutual understanding of the past. Eleanor did not reclaim the role of provider or protector. She reclaimed only one thing, the right to choose how close love was allowed to come. As Eleanor walked home that evening, she felt something unfamiliar yet comforting, peace without regret. She had learned that strength is not proven by punishment, nor forgiveness by forgetting. True power lies in knowing when to stand firm and when to soften, without losing yourself in either. Her story did not end with revenge, nor with reunion, but with wisdom earned the hardest way possible. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even after betrayal, life can still offer meaning, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and leave a comment. Your support keeps these stories alive, and sometimes, it helps someone believe that healing is still possible.